and Ryan are on the line. They are the ones, or I guess I've got Ryan on the line right now. Tiffany is a little bit under the weather, so we're going to try to get these folks in to present on this insurance information. We thought to jump the schedule a little bit. The insurance stuff is going to be pretty important to talk about now as we're getting out of Hurricane Irma and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of touch on some of that information. So we'll postpone the check-ins a little bit later on because I know Ryan and Tiffany are a little bit under the weather. So what I want to do is bring Ryan on. Ryan Obenreder, are you on the line? Is your mic on?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly fine. Do you want me to turn the screen over to you as well?
That's fine. Just because of so Tiffany's my wife. To give a little background, we're a husband and wife duo that owns state insurance. And this morning she woke up and was just like, I just don't feel that great. So it's just kind of thrown at me a little last minute. So I don't have any slides prepared or anything like that. But I'm definitely have some talking points and willing to answer any questions you guys might have at the end. So no need for the screen.
Okay, sounds good. Then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and show my screen. It's got the insurance cheat sheet on it, just so everybody's got something to look at here. And if you wouldn't mind it, and a couple things that came up, Ryan, just this last week. Cindy talked a little bit about expanding on the clue report and how carriers look at the borrower, the insured, but also the home itself, and what the clue report, the impact it has. Certainly, we'll want to talk about these post Irma scenarios and the claims that can kind of come in there, and maybe what flood and FEMA is going to be doing. So, what I'm going to do is shut up, and I'm going to turn this thing over to Ryan. And if you would, folks, please use the chat box for your questions, and we will field them as they come in. So, Ryan, take it away.
Perfect. So yeah, I guess I'll start off with kind of addressing clue and what that does. So typically, when we get quotes in, we get an address, a name, and some very basic information. We'll run through the quotes, we send them out as kind of a starting point. From that, we'll collect some more information, make sure that the buyer is feeling comfortable with the coverages that were offered, do some tweaks to kind of really structure that policy to fit their risk tolerance. And once we do that, we'll go through an application, which is collecting a little more information, answering a bunch of yes, no questions. Like most, really, the two most ones we get is, are you an arsonist? Which is, most people say no, and then make sure there's no pit bull or anything like that. Once that is all done, the carrier will run a clue report. And what that does is it looks at, like Leo was saying, previous claims on the house and from the insured or the buyer as well. They typically look back 3 to 5 years. Some will look back a little bit further. And but again, most companies, I'll use the word hurt. If there's a claim in the past, let's say there was 2 back-to-back water claims in one house, that may hurt the buyer just because of some, I'll use pre-existing conditions. So there could be, let's say, mold, or maybe this is kind of leading to, like, the roof wasn't repaired, things like that. So that's how the clue report works. It's at the very end of the whole application that we're able to order that. And again, that's on the carrier side. That's something that I wish that we as agents had a little more access to and can order it ahead of time. I know we get a lot of calls, especially in Pasco County, if there were sinkholes, if there were any sinkhole claims on the house. And that's something that, again, we typically will find out at the very end of the application process, not at the beginning. So I hope that kind of answers some questions.
Yeah, and
And
if I can kind of jump in too, Ryan, Tiffany,
yeah,
and I all work together at State Insurance, and for the benefit of the real estate agents here, the clue report, the carriers will either they have 3 options for the clue report. The clue report either follows the home, it either follows the insured, or it follows both, depending on their underwriting. So when you're working with a buyer and you look at a house, it's important to ask the listing agent, have there been any claims? It's also important to ask your buyer, have you had any homeowners claims? And most of the time, they're going to say either yes or no. It'll come. Think of the clue report as almost like a credit report, but not nearly as penetrative. Most of the time, Ryan, I think you'll agree, the clue report is something that if there's a small claim or something like that, where there's a tree fell or anything like that, it really doesn't do much harm. But it is still a record-keeping database for claims associated with the house and or with the insured, and the carrier will determine how they use that information. Do you think that's a pretty concise explanation, Ryan?
Oh, definitely. Another thing too I'd like to point out is with hurricane claims, or they call it acts of God. These are things that the homeowner had really no control over. It wasn't due to like negligence. It was a hurricane, which is outside of their control, and it knocked a tree down on the house. Insurance companies really don't, knock the insured. If it was something like had water on the floor during a party and someone slipped and fell and sued, or they left the sink on and then went to the grocery store and came back and their house had a foot of water in it. Those acts of God claims, again, don't hurt the insured in regards to usually getting a policy. It's only taken into account a lot of times, depending on the severity. But again, it's something that at the very end of the day, the carrier will make that ultimate decision on whether or not the policy is approved or denied.
Yeah, and typically the carrier will ask for more information. We go gather more information, and then it's up to the carrier at that point. Now, Chevelle typed in the chat box. Chevelle, thanks so much for using the chat box. What happens if someone has a pit bull? For example, let's say you got a buyer, and Chevelle is showing the buyer around, and they're looking at this house, and they really love the house. They call us here at State Insurance, or they send us an email. We do our little questionnaire. Do you have a dog? Yes. And it is a pit bull. What happens in that scenario, Ryan?
So we really like to find that information up front because there are a lot of insurance companies that will not insure a home with a pit bull just because of the liability exposure. They have statistical data that shows that pit bulls have more claims than chihuahuas, so therefore they are able to, kind of make those regulations and guidelines around whether or not a home insurance policy would be provided for someone that has a pit bull. With that being said, we do have several companies that allow pit bulls in the house. They will just remove animal liability from the policy, so that if, God forbid, the pit bull does injure someone, the insurance policy wouldn't provide coverage. Now, there is additional products outside of the home insurance where the homeowner could buy a separate animal liability policy if they really wish to insure the pit bull. But again, those are the things that we really want to make sure that we know ahead of time, because it eliminates a lot of frustrations down the road. Let's say that we present a quote where it was a great price and the home buyer kind of gets their heart set on paying $1,000 for the policy, and at the very end of the application we find out there's a pit bull. So we have to kind of go back to the first, kind of back to the drawing board again. And the odds are their company that provides insurance for homeowners with pit bulls, the price will be higher. It's tough to judge how much, but that's why we always like to get as much information as we can up front, so that we can have a pretty accurate quote as far as eligibility and meeting those underwriting guidelines that the companies have.
Yeah, and that's great information. And the carriers are going to use their statistical data more than anything else. And Chevelle, really, there's a list of animals called the vicious breed list, and it's got pit bulls on it and Dobermans and things like that. Really, what it comes down to is bite force. So if a Chihuahua bites you, it's not that big a deal. But if a pit bull bites, it's going to cause medical issues and things like that. So and you'll have clients that'll argue this is the nicest pit bull in the world, and they're discriminating against pit bulls, blah 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 blah. Okay, fine. If a pit bull bites, it breaks bone. That's, their bodies are designed that way. If Chihuahua bites, is not that big a deal. So it really comes down to a bite force kind of scenario. But that's information that we need to have kind of up front. And the key takeaway, realtors, for this what Ryan really wanted to say, or I'm sorry, what Ryan said, I want to reiterate, there's usually a workaround. If they have a pit bull, we can still write the policy. We just have to know it ahead of time so we know how to do it. Am I correct in saying that, Ryan?
Oh, 100%. And I see a question that popped up. It looks from Cindy regarding trampolines and playgrounds. Same thing. There are certain companies that will not insure homes with playgrounds, with diving boards, with pool slides, um, and but we always have a workaround with. We write with about 30 different companies here at State Insurance. So if one company doesn't, we definitely have one in our in our back pockets that will allow for those kind of unusual or higher risk characteristics of the home. So good question, Cindy.
Yeah, and to that point, you've got two different kind of carriers out there. You have what's called your captured, like your State Farms, who only write State Farm products, and then you've got agencies like State Insurance, where we market to several different carriers, just specifically so we have more options to give the client if they have a house with a trampoline, a diving board, and a pit bull. We probably have a carrier that's going to write that, but get us involved as early as possible because again, Ryan, and I know you and I and Tiffany will the more time we have, the easier it is because it's a lot of legwork, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails and due diligence to find these things. So get us involved early in the contracting process. Um, let's shift gears here real quick, Ryan. Let's talk about flood and flood insurance. We've just had
Yeah.
a Houston get hit with a big flood. And remember, flood, ladies and gentlemen, is a national program. It's not a state program. So when the nation has a flood claim, we all have flood claim exposure. So what's going to happen? All these real estate agents on the line that are listening to this, we just had a big storm. Houston had a big storm with a lot of payouts that FEMA's gonna make. What do you see? What do you hear as a pulse in the industry on the future of these properties that are in that A zone or AE zone? You still with me, Ryan?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I heard a loud noise. So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just kind of talk about the after hurricane, what the industry is probably going to happen and what's the flood insurance going to look like.
Well, yeah. At the end of September, I know that there's reform to the Biggert-Waters Act that will either be in place after September 30th or that will not be in place after September 30th. Either we'll go back to Biggert-Waters or there's some reform talked about. Now we've just had a storm. There's going to be a huge payout on floodwaters. So for the future, the end of 2017 going into 2018, these agents that are showing A zone and V zone homes, what can they look forward to for the buyers as far as an impact for flood? Or what are you hearing out there right now?
Yeah. So as Leo kind of touched on, flood insurance is going to go up. Home insurance is going to go up after these storms. Millions upon millions of dollars are being paid out for claims, not only in our state. I think Leo explained it very well. When like Houston has a flood disaster, we all have a flood disaster because it's a national program. So flood insurance is going to go up. You can kind of tell, I guess, buyers to count on it. The good news is that because of the financial stability or the financial situation that FEMA is in, there has been an ability for what's called private flood markets to kind of pop up. These are companies like through Lloyd's of London, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the world, definitely one of the oldest insurance companies in the world. Companies like Tower Hill, companies like American Integrity, they're all coming out with their own private flood insurance program. And typically it's a lot less than FEMA. So even though FEMA will be raising rates and will be kind of tightening down on their finances and making sure that the risk matches the premium, we do have other options with private flood insurance. Some of the nice benefits, they don't require an elevation certificate. One could help. Some companies will take an elevation certificate, and if the home is higher than the base flood elevation, the price will typically go down a lot more on the private side. If I could just kind of take a real quick detour, um, I know a lot of people call our agency and ask for flood insurance quotes, and kind of wondering why we need an elevation certificate. I know if you're driving, don't do this, but take your hand and kind of put it like a shelf, if you would, like kind of extend it out as like a level. So if your right hand's sticking out, this is what is the FEMA calls the base flood height or base flood elevation. So it's the height that they determine in certain areas that if floodwaters were to rise, they would rise to this height. It might be 10 feet, it could be 48 feet, it could be 3 feet, whatever they determine. That's the kind of the level or the playing field that they will give. An elevation certificate then will look at the specific house on where it falls in that elevation. So your left hand, if it's higher than FEMA's base flood height, when water rises, it's not going to get into that house, so price will be lower. If it's below that base flood height that FEMA will determine, the price will be a lot higher because of the risk factors that if floodwater were to rise, the odds are that house is going to have some significant flooding. So the reason a lot of times these kind of circle back now, a lot of these private flood markets don't need an elevation certificate, is they use different rating factors. I know some will use sea level as a rating factor. So as long as your house is not right on the beach, they'll write it, and they'll use it according to sea level, which they are able to find out in certain areas the actual elevation of the land, so they know that, okay, this house is X amount above sea level. And again, it's a really good alternative to FEMA. Some of the downfalls, though, it is a private option, so it's not backed by the government. And I know a lot of people are like to have that security, so that if, again, on the private option, if that company does go belly up, there's no guarantee that the claim will be paid. But the good news is these companies, in order to write private flood insurance, they have to have an extremely high financial stability rating. They have to have a large amount of capital in the bank, and they all have what's called reinsurance, which is a insurance product that insurance companies actually purchase to protect themselves if a back-to-back Hurricane Andrews happen. They are only pay out a certain ceiling, and anything above that ceiling, their reinsurance companies will pay out. So I hope that kind of answers some questions. And
Yeah, that's really well done. So basically, you've got two options. So these agents that are going out there that have buyers that are looking at this particular house in Tampa, and it is in the A zone. And what I keep telling these guys is this: when you pull up the list on the MLS, or you pull up Real List, or you call us or whatever, and you find out that that home is in a flood zone, don't be afraid of it. You still want to go take a look at it because we don't know what that rate is going to be. But the big thing is ask the agent that lists the home if there is a flood policy. If there is a flood policy, all we have to do, a little bit of paperwork at closing, and it's transferred over to the buyer. So for you agents that are listening on the phone, again, get into the habit of asking if there's been a claim on the property in the last 5 years, and ask them if there is an insurance policy on it. Now, a lot of the agents on the call work in the REO field, in the bank-owned properties. Typically, the bank won't have those insurance programs. So if you're showing an REO or a short sale where there is no way to determine if there's a flood policy, assume there is not. You're going to send an email or call Ryan, Tiffany, or I, and we'll probably be able to get you either one or two flood quotes. One through the private market, just like what Ryan was talking about, which doesn't require a lot of paperwork. And the other one will probably be through FEMA, NFIP, which may require some paperwork. The real takeaway is don't be afraid of the flood homes. There's an alternate option with the private market, which, like Ryan said, most of the time is cheaper than the actual government-backed insurance through FEMA. But we still need the information. We still need you to get us that information early on in the process. Also, make sure you don't trust the MLS, nor do you trust Real List. If you have a suspicion that a home is in a flood zone, please call us. Ryan, how long does it take for us to run an actual flood determination?
Oh, seconds. I mean, we can do it. I think I've done it actually for Chevelle when on the fly. I mean, if you guys call our office, I can do it, within minutes while I'm on the phone with you, and email you the FEMA flood zone determination.
Yeah, so that'll be the actual flood zone determination from the horse's mouth to show what flood zone it's in. For all you folks that are listing properties, and of course, when we get a prequal, we do this as well. We run a flood determination, so we verify that the information that the county and the city has is accurate. And you'll find about 1 out of every 8 times it's not accurate information in the fact that it is not current. It was accurate at one time. It just has not been updated with the changing firm maps and all this insurance garbage that you guys don't need to know about. But the big thing is don't be afraid of these flood homes. There's a workaround for it. Have you heard anything, Ryan, about going back to Bigger's Waters or whether this referendum through the legislature September 30th will go through or not?
I know I think it was pushed back just because of all the hurricanes
Okay.
that happened. It was pushed back and extended. So the NFIP have until December 1st to kind of meet with Congress and to vote in. It's the 21st Century Flood Reform Act, which basically it's there to improve the financial stability of FEMA and to kind of help with rates, to allow more private flood options, and to just kind of help the consumer as much as they can with flood insurance, because it is an expensive part of when of their insurance portfolio
Right. No,
for the
that's pretty
buyers.
important. Okay, Ryan, as these realtors are running around, and let's say it's not a flood issue, they're looking at homes. We've had a lot of damage. We've had a lot of roof damage. We've got debris, mold, leaks, you name it. What should they be looking for when they're touring a listing or they're taking buyers out now, post Irma, regarding hazard, not flood, but hazard insurance and the insurability of the homes?
Yeah, so the one of the biggest things that really helps insurance companies determine that eligibility and to look at, they call it the four main points or the four main areas of a house. So that's going to be your roof, your AC, the plumbing, and the electrical system. And so that's why there's a 4-point inspection that is specifically designed for insurance companies to know the risk characteristics of the house. So after with Irma and all these other hurricanes, if you're in the house, I mean, if you clearly see some issues and damage, that's one is going to be an issue. Every insurance company does at least a drive-by inspection of the home just to make sure that the house is actually let's say,
Bear with me here. Let me fix that.
yep. I know we have a lot of echo.
Hang on. Okay, Ryan, are we back on there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Perfect. So I was saying every insurance company is going to do a drive-by inspection, and they do that even before Irma and all the other hurricanes, just to make sure that there wasn't anything missed as far as on the underwriting process. Again, we send everything to the underwriters as much information as we can, but again, there's only so much they can see without an actual inspector going in and looking at the house. So that's when things will pop up, like they had a trampoline in the backyard, which we didn't know about, or a pool slide because it wasn't disclosed. So anyways, they'll do that drive-by inspection. They because of of Irma and these other hurricanes, a lot of companies are now doing an interior inspection as well. It's something that they will. It's complimentary. The buyers or the homeowners don't have to pay for it. It's just a way for the insurance companies to protect themselves from some unforeseen risk. So if you're in your house, if you're in the house and you notice some things, give us a call right away to see if hey, there was some mold on the ceiling. Is this going to be an issue? The odds are it is. But we do have some other ways to work around it with getting extensions on, or I'm sorry, exceptions from insurance companies if they plan on, let's say if it was a roof leak, to fix the roof after closing. And again, that 4-point inspection is typically it's homes 30 years or older need that 4-point. But if it is, let's say, a newer home where you do notice some issues or maybe some odors that smell like mold and things like that, that inspection is there to kind of help insurance companies to determine the eligibility of a home. So I wouldn't hesitate, recommending maybe ordering one so that the buyers know what's there. Of course, the buyer's report, which insurance agents really never want to see. That's also another great report that that the buyers can get to kind of unearth some of these these issues that may have happened after the hurricanes. And again, we're always here, between Leo, myself, and Tiffany, happy to answer questions if something specific pops up from an inspection that you're just not sure of, or the homeowner is not going to be sure of on an eligibility standpoint, whether or not an insurance policy is going to be offered. So we're happy to answer those specific questions.
Yeah, great points right there. And realtors, I want you to think about this here. When the biggest problem that we had in Irma was wind and flood, obviously, but we also had power outage. So you're going to be touring houses. Look at the roof. When you walk up to the house, get in a position where you can see the roof. If you have shingles that have moved, that are curling, bent, or missing, there's probably a higher chance of roof leak at that point. Now, remember what also happened is power outage. Your AC unit is also a dehumidifier. I know in my area here in Seminole, crazy as this may seem, we were out of power for 8 days. I didn't have any roof leaks or anything like that, but if I did have a roof leak, there was no way for me to get that water out. And mold can start within hours, especially if if it drops on that sheetrock and you've got no AC and no way to dry it out. So you can get that mold started without any signs of it, the little spots on the ceiling, that kind of thing. Usually what you're going to find is the smell. You're going to, and Ryan just kind of reached to that point, that musty smell that I kind of, it'll tickle your nose a little bit. That's what I want you to really kind of look for when you go into these houses. Look at the roof on the outside, whether they're missing shingles, whether they're trees that are really overhanging it that were just trimmed off. That's a good indication that limbs were broken, landed on the roof, and they had them trimmed. The debris out front, that's evidence that there maybe have been limbs that have hit the roof. And then looking inside, ask the listing agent to ask the seller how long they were out of power. If they're out of power for more than a few days, it may be a good idea to have your inspector also order a mold report. Now, it's not very costly. I think, I'm not sure what Lenny charges for it. Kevin, are you still on the line? You're still with us, right? Do you know what Lenny charges to run a mold report?
I don't know for sure. You would have to ask him, but I think it's around 250.
Okay. And I do know that he gets the results back really within 24 to 48 hours. It's a real quick turnaround. But mold is a big issue, especially if your buyer has kids. And that's respiratory infections, bronchitis, all kinds of stuff. And of course, on the insurance side, that's a very big deal for us to come in and remediate. We got to get a crew in there. They got to come in and tear stuff out. And then you got to have people put sheetrock back in. It's a big deal. So when you're driving by, look for the debris on the side of the road. Look above the house to see if you see any recently removed limbs. That's an indicator that may have fallen on the roof. Look for those shingles that are damaged. And of course, when you enter the home, if you smell any mold or anything like that, that's a warning sign. And certainly, definitely ask how long they were out of power. If they don't have any way to dehumidify that home, that mold will grow and proliferate and cause all kinds of problems, especially when it comes to a claim for insurance and things like that. So I just wanted to make sure I threw my 2 cents in there. We still have Ryan on the line right now, and the chat box is open for any insurance-related questions. Ryan, do we have anything else we need to touch on for these agents?
No, I just let everyone knows that, in case it wasn't, widely known, pretty much I think actually every company now is writing, business as usual. There aren't any holds because of hurricanes. Some companies were requiring that the home the home purchasers, the buyer signs a document stating that they aren't aware of any claims that were happening on the house. So we're kind of getting back to that, business as normal kind of routine right now. So we're always here between Leo, myself, and Tiffany to answer any questions, and happy to help. We do everything we can to get the insurance in place so that when it comes time to close, it's a much easier process, and the insurance piece doesn't, destroy any deals or it's money out of your pocket. So like I said, I think that's pretty good. Our Leo just posted our email address. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot that in an email to Leo. My email address, it's just Ryan, RYAN, @State Insurance Online. And like I said, always here to help.
Okay, and I'm putting yours on there as well, Ryan. And
hey, Leo, we've got a question here from Jenny.
Yep, go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, so my question is, if there was damage done to the roof, regardless if it was due to Irma or not, then does that now make that house uninsurable? For example, like my FHA buyer cannot buy that house even if they've fallen in love with it?
So there's damage to the roof, and it is uncovered through the inspection?
Correct.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was going to say, so it really depends on the exact situation. So if it was just like a shingle that either blew off or there were some curling shingles or things like that, if it's more of a minor issue, we can always get an exception from the insurance company that whatever that repair is will be repaired within 30 days or 45 days, 60 days after closing. They typically want to have some sort of like signed or like roofing contract or quotes, just showing that the homeowner is really serious about fixing that issue. We've had some that the roof is at its life expectancy. There's lots of granular loss. There are curling shingles, missing shingles, and the homeowner plans to replace the entire roof after closing. And again, we have companies that are very considerate and kind of lenient when it comes to those situations, understanding that maybe the seller's not going to do it, but the buyer plans on doing it, and they want to do everything they can to not mess up the closing for them. So they will offer those exceptions. If it is something that's more severe, well, let's say a tree punctured the roof, and there's moisture and water and things like that, that one's definitely a lot harder to get exceptions on, because it's not just now the roof repair. It could be mold, there could be structural damage and things like that. So again, if it's more of that minor side, it's pretty simple to get those exceptions. On the more severe cases, we do have markets that are outside of what's called the admitted carriers, which just basically means that the state of Florida guarantees if the company does become insolvent, it goes bankrupt after a storm or from claims, that they'll guarantee payment on those claims. There's companies like Lloyd's of London which don't have that backing, but again, they're literally multi-billion-dollar insurance companies. So the odds of them going bankrupt is very, very, very small. But anyway, through those carriers, those non-admitted insurance companies, because they don't have to follow the rules and regulations of Florida, they can be more lenient in offering insurance policies for those homes that have more of those major issues. I'll be upfront, those policies typically are not cheap. They're very expensive. They tend to have a lot of exclusions regarding some certain coverages. But again, a lot of times that'll just allow them to get a policy, kind of check that off the list, so that they can actually purchase the home. And then again, once the roof is repaired or once that issue is addressed, we can then switch it to a standard home policy, or go back out and reshop it since the repair was done. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
Does that make sense, Jenny?
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem.
Leo, if Ryan's done, I just have two quick things to add. Should I wait?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. One, I just wanted to, Ryan had just talked about how the state will, if what I understood is if the private insurance company goes out of business, the state kind of backs them or guarantees them. That happens in our business as well. And I don't know if any of you noticed on the settlement statements for about 3 years, it just ended, but there was a $3.28 title surcharge charged to the client. And that's because a big title company in Orlando who was doing a lot of really shady shit went out of business and had so many claims that they put their underwriter out of business. So the state took that debt on basically. But what they did, and I think they would do it in homeowners insurance as well, is they said, okay, we've just lost, X number of millions of dollars. So we're going to turn around and charge it to every consumer and, a small amount, $3.28 until we've recovered it, probably plus interest. So I find that pretty interesting that the state does that. They say they back it, but then they just turn around and charge the buyers and sellers. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, this is particularly for Leo, Ryan, and Tiffany, but anybody on the call can come. I only have a few seats, and it is tomorrow, but we have the only survey company that we use because we've used many, and these folks are just incredible. It's called ME Land Surveying. They're the official survey company of Baba. They'll be at Baba 22, but the president of that company is coming in. They're bringing lunch into my office for my people as a thank you. But he's I haven't met him yet. I've only spoken with him. He sounds pretty brilliant. He is, of course, a survey expert, so he's going to talk about some of the finer points of understanding surveys. But he's also going to be touching on cybersecurity. We're seeing more and more of these email hacks happening. I was personally targeted over the weekend, and we stopped it. But it's very, very complex the way it's happening. So if anybody, I've got about maybe 4 seats. If anybody wants to show up at Insured Title 12:30 tomorrow and get to know this guy and ask whatever questions you have, you're more than welcome to.
Good deal. Do they also do elevation certificates? Do you know? I should probably just show up, shouldn't I? And ask that question.
I'll tell you they do, but I don't know. So that way you have to show up and ask them. But okay. Yeah, they're fantastic. They're survey companies by and large are not very good. What we found over the years, not necessarily with their surveyors in the field, but with kind of the way their businesses are run. And we've had a lot of problems over the last decade down here. But these folks are fantastic, and everybody will meet them at Baba 22. But feel free to come tomorrow.
What time is that?
12:30 at my office.
Okay, 12:30 at, I'm putting it in the box, ITA. Okay, so Cindy, 12:30 at ITA tomorrow. That's great. Guys, what we want to make sure, Ryan, Tiffany, and I, here's the deal with the insurance stuff. Get in the habit of asking the listing agent, get in the habit of asking them if there's been any claims, if they've submitted any claims, anything like that, and pay attention when you're going to these homes. Look at the roof, look at the debris field out front, and use your nose. If you smell mold, that kind of thing, then there may be mold in there. The big thing that Ryan, I, and Tiffany want you to take away from this is 9.9 times out of 10, it's insurable. 9.9 times out of 10, it's insurable. We can't guarantee rate, but 9.9 times it is insurable. If you get certainly state insurance, Ryan, Tiffany, and I, or any insurance company that you work with, whatever the agent is, if you get them involved very early in the process, during the contracting period where you're negotiating, so we can start doing all the due diligence and the work and the reporting and the clue reports and all that stuff that we need to do, we can usually give you a roadmap on what you need to do. We can kind of pat our backs on this one. Ross Glass, who is sometimes on this call and is a member of Baba, Ryan and Tiffany worked tremendously on a house that failed all 4 points of the 4-point inspection. All 4 points. The roof was fouled, the electrical had problems, the HVAC had problems, and the plumbing had problems. We basically gave him a roadmap on how to get this insured for this price and how to get it insured for that price. Ross executed that roadmap both with the buyer and the seller on both sides, and we got the deal done for him. The moral of the story is call us early, get us the information that we need, and we can tell you how to make an uninsurable home, or I'm using quotey fingers if you can't see me, a potentially uninsurable home insurable and get the deal done. Again, we can't guarantee rate, but 9.9 times out of 10, we can usually get it done for you because we represent so many carriers. Ryan, do you have anything for the group?
No, I think that's a great, kind of ending place is regarding, state insurance